We're up to over here, 14A1 in the art scroll. We're in the last paragraphs of 14A1 on the right side.
Correct. Gemara discusses.
Okay, yeah, got it. Ton of choda. Okay, yep. Because it's not hard Gemara. We're going to try to get to the end of the parak today. Okay, here we go. Ton of choda. One brayse to learn. Uberes umenikas, pregnant and nursing women. Misanes berishonis, fasted on the first of the fast days. Remember, the fast days were with regard to when rain didn't fall. The first 3 in Marcheshvan. Then we had 3 middle and 7 serious ones further on. Amar Avasi, Nikoid, Tana Chada, Ubaret Semenikas, pregnant and nursing women, Misanis Berishim Shainis, fast on the first fast days, Misanis Ba'achronis, but do not fast on the last days. You'll notice the Baraisa is skipping out seemingly the middle, which means that we really don't know whether the first over here, when it says Misanis Berishim, whether it really means the first of the Tanaisim or it really means the middle of the fast, which obviously the Gemara is going to tackle immediately. Vitani Idov, Misanos Ba'achroines, the nursing and pregnant women fast on the last of the fasts, they Misanos B'Rishonis, but not on the first. Vitani Idov, on the third price taught, Ein Misanos Loi B'Rishonis V'Loi Ba'achroines. So the Gemara says we got 3 conflicting varieties. Amarav Ashi, Nokid and Sois Biyodcha. Take the middle set of fasts. We have the first 3, the second 3, and the last 7. Take the middle 3 as the only dates, only fasts which pregnant and nursing women are obligated to observe. Then it starts in the Kula because the price could be explained with all of these explanations. In other words, in every case, assume that the first is really the second, right? And in each case, you could do this. That the first is always the second, except for the last one, where you'll learn it all. It's the first and the third, but not the second. So the second set of the series is what they have to fast. We are now on 14A2. We just got to 14A2. Hi, Jen. How are you?
Good, Yitzhak. Baruch Hashem, how are you?
Very good. So we're on 14A2, literally the top of 14A2, left-hand column. The Mishnah said, Ma elu yiseres ala rishonos. In what aspect are the final 7 fasts more stringent than the first 6? And the answer is, Elo shebe'elu misarinin v'noyalines and chaniyos. Except that we called out, we cry out, and we're going to find out what the crying out means with extra prayers or with the shofar or a combination of both. You cry out and you close the stores. What does it mean to cry out? Rabbi Yehuda, you blow on shofars to say this is really serious. That there's no rain. Rabbi Yehuda, Beredin of Shmuel Bar Shilas, Bishmei de Rav Omar. No, Ba'anenu. What does it mean, Anenu? Not the Anenu that we were talking about, that we say when you fast, that we talked about yesterday, whether you say it by Shemea Tefillah or stick it in between the 8th and 9th blessings of Goal Yisrael and Rifa'enu. This is talking about the Anenu, that when we say Salichos before, at the end of Elul, going into Rosh Hashanah, you know that at the end, we say a tefillah that says, Anenu Hashem Anenu, we have a whole long tefillah that goes at the end after Shema Kelenu, the tefillah of Shema Kelenu, there's a whole bunch of things that are said. That's what they're talking about. All the salichos that we say at the end of our salichos. So says the Gemara, Kasal Kedah, I might have thought, the Rav who says they cry out with Anenu, which means all those salichos, the extra salichos, Lo Yama B'Shofar, he holds you don't need the shofar. The other the shayfer, Rabbi Yehuda, that says you blow with the shayfer. Lo yama ba'aneinu. He says you don't cry out with the extra slichas. But Tanya, but we learned in a Baraisa, 8 points from Mishit, May Sheva Taanis and Alatzibu. We should not detract from the 7 fast that we decree on the community in the final series when rain really hasn't fallen throughout the winter. Shebehem Yudches HaTurois, on which there are 18 cries that are made. It's similar to what is the sign for this? Yerichai, Jericho. What is it about Yerichai? The famous biblical story. The Yerichai Shayfers have it. In Yerichai, Shayfers was sounded because the walls of Jericho fell, sunk into the ground, and Yeshua was able to capture the city of Yerichai. How? With the blowing of the Shayfers. So that too, over here too, it's also shayfer. So it says the Gemara, in this case, it should be a reparation, it should be a shloga of the one who says we cry out with the extra salichais of Anenu and not with shayfer. So says the Gemara. Now, Ella, the shayfris with regard to a shayfer kulal loy pligi de karile etzra. Everybody agrees that blowing on a shayfer is a definition of crying out. That means even Rab that says you say extra salichais, you say extra tefillos, extra prayers. Nonetheless, you definitely sound the shayfers. Keep pleading by neighbor. They're only arguing on whether you add extra anegus, you add extra salichais. Marsa Rab says Kari Le'asra, that Anenu is also called crying out. So you add it. Marsaba like Kari Le'asra, what he called, and Rabbi Yehuda, that the extra salichas are not called crying out, and therefore it's only the shayfer that's needed in the series, the 7 fast series at the end, and with no extra tefillahs. Says the Gemara. According to Rav, who says crying out is also with Anenu, Kol Sheken b'Shayfris, definitely with Shayfris, because Shayfris is clearly calling out. Kol Shayfer, is crying out. But and above and beyond that, we add extra prayers of the Anenu, the whole set of Anenu at the end of Salichos that we today say in Elul when we say Salichas at the end. But according to the one the that Rabbi Yehuda says, you cry out with a shayfer, it only means a shayfer abu ba'anenu loy, but no to anenu. You don't have to add the extra slichas. So says the Gemara, but we learned in another bride. So Vishar kol yemei haparodios hamisrakshos lovoi hamisrakshos, with regard to all types of punishments. In other words, all not rain, not the failure of rain, but other distressful situations. For an example, 1483, scratching. What is scratching? Take a look at number 23 on the bottom. Dry boils which cause one to scratch themselves for relief. However, moist boils, which are extremely painful, the shayfer was also sounded. Okay? But, so in other words, if people were attacked, if there was a plague of boils, right? Especially the wet ones, which become very, very itchy, they would blow out on the shayfer. Chagol, or there were locusts. This said number 24. Look on the bottom, number 24. The Baraisa refers to a specific type of locust, one that did not heavily damage the crops. But those locusts that are more severe, of course the shayfer would be blown. And Zevuv Vitsira Visitushin, flies, wasps, and mosquitoes. There were a lot of them. Vishiluach Nechosim Akrabim, and the dispatching by Hashem of snakes and scorpions to injure but not to kill. Loy hayam nasriyin. They did not cry out with any instrument. El tzayakin. They would cry out with tefillah with davening. They would not blow the shofar in these cases. They would only simply cry out for mercy. What makes this unbelievable, that's this week's parsha. When Yosef is thrown into the pit, when Joseph is thrown by his brothers into the pit, the pasuk says, "Barek," the pit, the cave was empty. Ein boy mayim. There was no water in the cave. Rashi says, "Ein boy mayim, avol noshim ve'akrabim yesh boy." But snakes and scorpions there were, literally inside the cave. So it's amazing, as always, you learn the daf and you write on the parsha of the week. Now, says the Gemara, "Midit sa'aka b'peh," in as much as calling out over here in this parisha with all these disasters, it's called by crying out with the mouth by additional prayers. Hisra b'shaypa. Then certainly a procedure when a parisha talks about expressly, what do you call it? In other words, you'll notice it says over there, "Midit sa'aka b'peh," with crying out, because the brisa ended the brisa with the words, "Lo haya mismasrinin." They did not cry out. Ela tzayakin, they called out. They cried out in mercy. Two different words. Midit sa'aka, when the word sa'aka is used, cried out or calling out, we say it means bepeh. With sa'aka b'tefillah, we cry out with prayer. That means the word hasra'ah, that crying out means b'shayfris, So this baraisa is a question on Rav, who said that crying out consists of the word hasra'ah, crying out, also includes the salichais, the extra salichais of Anenu. So now I've got a problem. How is Rav going to explain what clearly in this brisa seems to be saying? Masriyan is shofar, Sayakin, screaming out, is tefillah. So the word that we used before was teruah, nisarin, is hasra. How could he say that all? It's actually a Talmudical dispute. The Tanya we learned al elu masrinim b'Shabbos. For these we cry out even on Shabbos, and you notice the word that's used is masriyin, which is the sound we seem to be saying of shofar. And right away you all understand that of course we don't blow a shofar on Shabbos. So what's going on over here? Al elu masriyin b'Shabbos. Al Ish Kipur Gaius, a city that's been beleaguered by enemy troops. Oy Nahar, a river that overflowed its banks and is a tsunami that's about to flood the fields and houses. Safina Motrepes Bayam, or a ship that's floundering in the sea and it's in danger of sinking. Rabbi Yossi says, Azra, you're allowed to shout to others to come to their aid, but you're not allowed to call out to Hashem in prayer, since it's uncertain whether the prayer will be answered. You're not allowed to go ahead and mar the Kedusha Shabbos on that day in vain. On Shabbos, as you know, we have a much shorter Shmona Esrei. You ever notice on Shabbos, the Shemona Esrei is shorter? Because on Shabbos, we do not request things from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's a day of rest. It's a day of rest for us, and it's a day of rest for Hashem, as it were. So we do not request things from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We do not ask for things on Shabbos. except in absolute emergency cases, obviously. Now, Yosi says, since I'm unsure in this case that anything is going to help, I'm not going to go break the rule, the cardinal rule that we don't ask for things, we don't pray for help, we only praise on Shabbos. But you'll notice the words, says the Gemara, B'mai, what's going on here? Ilema, the word, Misarin b'Shabbos, we cry out on the Shabbos, means Shaibis, Shaifris, we cry out with Shaifis, Shaifris b'Shabbos, Mishari, on Shabbos, are you allowed to blow the shofar? Elah bi'anenu. Elamai, the Mishnah is talking about you cry out with extra salichas of anenu. The kari le hasra. And you see it's called hasra. Shema mina, that the word hasra could mean not just crying out with a shofar, but even crying out with tefillah with anenu. Memela, the Mishnah does support Rav that the word Asra can even be for Anenu. Says the Gemara, Bishnei de Rabbi Yehuda Nesiah. In the years of Rabbi Yehuda the prince, he was the grandson of Rabbi HaKadosh, the one who wrote the Mishnah. Ha'ivit Sarah. There was once a distress, but it wasn't a drought, but there was something else going on. Okay, Yud Dalin Amid Beis, 14b1. 14b1. Gozak Talas Esrei Taniyos. He went ahead and he decreed 13 fasts, just like the 13 fasts that we have with regard to the lack of rain, 3, 3, and 7. And it was not answered. It was not lifted. Saba Lamigzi to pay. Rabbi Yehuda Nesiah thought to add additional fast days. Amalei Rabbi Ami told him, Harei Amru, the Chazal have said, we do not excessively inconvenience the public. We do not excessively inconvenience the public. Therefore, we're not going to add more fast days. Rabbi Ami who said this, that Chazal prevented Rabbi Yehuda from adding additional fast days. The truth is, he was doing it for himself. He did not want to continue fasting, so he convinced Rabbi Yehuda that this was in fact a rabbinical dictum. So says the Gemara, Ella, the number of fast days are not allowed to go above 13, only in the case of rain. But in all other types of punishments, you can continue fasting until you're answered from that. We also learned when the sages said you should do 3 fasts, they start setting up the 3, 3, and 7. They set the 3 fasts, Kishamru Sheva, and when they say they should take on an additional 7 fasts, Lo Yamru Elu Gishamim, Avalashamine Paradias, there's no limit. It's time of a you keep going until you get answered. This price that we just learned seems to be a slug up, a reparation of Rav Ami, who said that in any event, in any distress, you don't go above 13 fasts. Amalach Rav Ami would tell you, Tanoi. In fact, it's a machlokes Tanoim. It's a machlokes. It's a dispute among the Tanoim. The time, because we learned, you're not allowed to establish more than 13 fasts on the community. Because you cannot excessively inconvenience the public. Divrei Rebbe, so is the words of Rebbe HaKadosh. Shimon Gamliel said, Loi min Hashem huzeh, that's not the reason why fasts were limited to 13. because the time of the early rains has completely passed. So when it comes to the rains, by the time you set up the first three, which takes you through Macheshvan, and if you look at the second Tosfos on the page, look at the second Tosfos on the page, in the right side, in the right side of the Gemara, the second Tosfos, Sheyatza Zaman Sharavia, it's a small Tosfos, the Zaman Ravia, the time for the rain, the Yaira, remember we had Yaira or Malkosh, the good Yaira rain, the beginning rains, Have b'Macheshvan, are in the first month of Macheshvan. V'yotza Macheshvan passed. So Rav Shimon Gamliel is saying, since Macheshvan, the good time passed, and it did not rain, so we put in over the next couple of months the other fast. Nonetheless, we don't extend it because the good times have already passed. But in any other situation where that doesn't apply, where in fact what we're waiting for is the Yeshua, not complaining about what didn't take place in the past. Therefore, al-kacham, you can fast and fast and fast until you are answered. Obviously, by the way, this is important. We should just take the point. Today, we do not do this. There are on rare occasions that a fast day is established. So, for an example, if heaven forbid Israel gets into a war, right? Many a time a fast day has been established. Okay? And a day of prayer is established. But we never do more than one fast day at a time. We are not on their level. We barely know how to pray as it is. We fly through the davening. We have trouble staying with our intention through one Shemona Esrei. We recognize that. But we still try to do what we can, but we do not go overboard anymore. But this again was at the time of the Gemara. This is how they talk. Okay? Now says the Gemara. The people of Ninveh sent to Rebbe. People such as us, who need rain even in the summertime because we have a different, our land is different, right? We're a lowland or a highland or whatever it is. Our rainy season is different. Hey, what do? Are we compared to individuals who need rain? Or as comparable to the public who needs rain? The Gemara explains. Comparable to individuals who we should pray for rain in the blessing of Shemea Tefillah, like any time that anybody wants to put in a supplication. You're allowed to daven always before the words Kiatos Shemea Tefillah's Kol Be'amchi Yisrael Barakmin. Before those words, a person is allowed to put in any private prayer that he wants to put in when he's praying Shemona Esrei. Or are we comparable to the public? Because the entire city needs rain. And therefore it belongs to saying Talu Mata Lebracha, that we're going to start saying next Matzah Shabbos. By the way, next Matzah Shabbos. Remember December 5th? Next Matzah Shabbos is the evening of December 4th, going into December 5th. So next Matzah Shabbos, which is during Rosh Chodesh, Rosh Chodesh Shabbat is in Rosh Chodesh Teves is Shabbos Sunday. That, in fact, we're going to switch next Matzah Shabbos to the same Talamot Lebracha. Now, who are we like? Okay? So the question is, who are we like? Are we like individuals who are just putting in our own private tefillahs, and therefore we're going to put in for rain when we need it in the summertime, said the people of Nineveh? Or do we say it by Birchas Hashanah because that's what we need it? Now, before we go further, I'm reminding everybody of the conversation we had about a week or so ago. The truth is, this December 5th date, December 6th, is a misnomer. Remember, we said this is really based on Europe time, that in truth, any place 60 days after their equinox, meaning when their rainy season really begins, is when people should start saying Talamot Bracha. But what was determined? That we would be established like Bavel, like Europe, period, throughout the world. That's the establishment. We don't look at the different times of the rainy season. The perfect example, in fact, is Boker. The rainy season of Florida is when? From May to November, during the summertime. Not now. It doesn't rain. It's the non-rainy season. This is the time when everybody goes down to Florida because the weather's so great. Except for the Zimmermans, of course, who only seem to come in this wind in the summertime. But anyways, the point here is what was established, we said, even though logically, right? Logically, each place, geographical place, should be saying Saint Talamoto based on their timing. Nonetheless, we're not going to have a million different rules in Klal Yisrael. We're going to establish one set time, and that was based on where the Jews were for a good chunk of the last 2,000 years. Okay? Now, on this comes Rebbe, and back to the Gemara. Shalach Luhu, Rebbe sent his response. Ki yechidim temisu v'shmei tefillah. You're like individuals, and therefore you stick it in as a private prayer in middle of Shema Keleinu, and you leave Barech Aleinu. If the rest of the world is saying same Baracha, you continue to say same Baracha until the nighttime of December 4th, when you switch to the same Talamot Bracha. Frank the Gemara Meisvei, I got a question. Amar Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says, Amasai, when is it true that the fast beginning Kislev? Like our Mishnah said, that the Yechidim fast in Mar Cheshvan, and the people start fasting in the Rish Chodesh Kislev. Bizman Shashonim Kitikton. In the time when the years pass along in their natural course, so that the reaping occurs in Nisan and the sowing in, and the plowing, and the harvesting in Cheshvan. Good morning, Daddy. We're up to 14b2. 14b2. Yud Dalet Amid Beis number 2.
All right.
Okay, literally on the top. The Yisrael Shiruyin Alad Mosa. And we're talking about the Jews when they were living in Eretz Yisrael. The order of the fast, 3 for the Yechidim in Macheshvan, 3 in Kislev, and then the 7 only is when in the normal conditions in Eretz Yisrael. Aber Bizman Hazeh, when the agricultural and meteorologist conditions are very hot, everything is determined according to the years. A warmer year requires more rain. And and everything according to their region, and everything according to the period of time. So that means those people that are in Boca Raton, whose rainy season starts in May and ends in November, in fact, should be saying Talumoto Libracha in the summertime. That in fact, if you live in Boca, you should be saying the same Talumoto, not at the same time as New York. You should do it in the opposite direction. Okay, that's what the Gemara here. This is what it says. So
are we really saying it for us, or we're saying it for Eretz Yisrael?
No, for us. Look what it said there. Look at this for just this Baraisa. Go back
It's
again.
full, they do the third of
Go back to
Machshava.
the bottom of 14b1. Meisvei, Omer Rebbe Yehuda, Amosai. When did those public fasts begin in Kislev? Bismad Shashonim Kisikon, when the year passes along in its natural course, okay? Which means in Nisan you begin to plow and you harvest in Cheshvan. The Yisrael Shiruyin Alad Mosan, and Klal Yisrael is in their land. Aval Bisman Azeh. Remember, the Gemara was sealed 300 years later. Most people were not living in Israel anymore. They were dispersed. Hakol Lefi Hashonim, Hakol Lefi Mekaimon, Hakol Lefi Zaman, all the way through. So, Jerry, again, we're not at the end of the halacha, of course, but basically right here, based on this brayso, theoretically, everybody, every place should be saying it based on their geographical position. That's when, whenever their individual rainy season should be, that's when they should be saying the same Talamot Lebracha, and not December 4th in the evening, not next month of Shabbos. So on this, Amalei, so they answered, Masnisa Romis Aleh, the Rebbe, are you challenging Rebbe from a Baraisa? Rebbe Tanu, Rebbe was a Tana, Upolik, and he has the right to argue on a Baraisa. This is one of the rare times where you find, especially when it's Rebbe HaKadosh, the redactor of the Mishnah. He's the great Tana. He's the great Tana. And he could have, if he didn't include this Baraisa in his Mishnahs, it's because he argues with this Baraisa. So my Havi Allah, what was
When you're ready,
what was the issue? So what's the halacha? Rav Nachman Omar B'Berachas Hashonim. The people in Nineveh were told, who needed the rain in the summertime, like the people in Boca Raton, which he said, put it in, say the same Talmud Lebracha in the summertime. Rav Sheshes Omar, Rav Sheshes said, no, you're not a public for Shemea Tefillah. Boca Raton, you're only a bunch of individuals. So it's an individual supplication. So stick it into Shema Kelenu before Kiata Shemea Tefillah's Kol Peh Amcha Yisrael B'Rachman, because you listen to the call of the Tefillah, or just the sounds of your people you saw with mercy. The Hilchasa, and this is the halacha, the Shemea Tefillah, in the blessings of Shemea Tefillah. So it turns out that in the middle of Shemona Esrei, in the bracha Parei Chaleinu, you say the same bracha, and you switch to the same Talmud Bracha on the evening of December 4th, i.e. next Motzei Shabbos. Okay, next Motzei Shabbos. That's in the same in Parei Chaleinu. But in fact, if you're in Boca Raton, Daddy, you're listening to this. If you're in Boca Raton in the summertime, Shema Kelenu, you should be asking for rain for Boca Raton. That's what this Gemara says. Amar Rav Sheshes Amar b'Shemea Tefillah. For those who need rain in the summertime, mention it in Shemea Tefillah. Ve'ilkasa b'Shemea Tefillah. And the halacha is in Shemea Tefillah. Very good.
Why it doesn't rain in Boca Raton in the summer?
No, it's supposed to rain in the summer. The hurricane season.
It does rain.
The hurricane season is from May through November. In fact, when we switch to the same Talmud Lebracha next month of Shabbos, in Boca, it's not raining. In fact, it's beautiful. That's why everybody goes down to Florida in the wintertime, because it's sunny, it's beautiful, it's not rainy, etc. So why are they saying the same Talamot on December 4th? The answer is this Gemara, right here, the Gemara we just learned, which is amazing once again, that the Daf Yomi is matching up literally to the what he called the facts on the ground as we're learning. That's the great Siyata Dishmaya. Okay? Nothing is just coincidence. Says the Mishnah Vaita, when they set up the final 7 fasts, on Monday they partially opened the doors of the food, of the stores, so people could go shopping towards the evening. But on Thursday, they were open the whole day. They covered a Shabbos regarding Shabbos. They learned. Hey, when was this ruling taught? On Monday, they partially opened the doors towards the evening. On Thursday, covered Shabbos, because of the honor of Shabbos. On Monday, they only partially opened the doors. And on Thursday, they opened the doors completely. So in other words, are the stores permitted to function normally on Thursday? Something Gemara Tashma, the Tanya, B'Sheni Maptin on Erev. On Monday, they opened the doors partially in the evening. And on Thursday, they opened the doors completely. Because of the honor of Shabbos. If he had 2 doors in his store.
We're talking only about the grocery stores.
Yes.
But not clothing store, let's say.
Well, not so possible. He should only open one door and lock the other door. But if he has a bench which he places in front of the door, he can open up both doors as usual and not worry, because by putting the bench there, you're showing and making it a little difficult for people to get into your store. You show the difficulty. So my father just mentioned that the stores that are allowed to be open during the series of 7 fasts is only the food for Shabbos. Daddy, it could be argued that some of the clothing stores were opened as well. Because if a person needed new clothes for Shabbos, for the honor of Shabbos, he'd be allowed to. The shoe store, the shoemaker would be allowed to be open. Look like Shabbos.
Probably, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So in other words, food is the staple, because everybody needs to shop for food for Shabbos.
Right.
But the ancillary stuff were open probably as well.
Even a pharmacy, for example.
Right, and for a pharmacy example, exactly.
Yeah.
You know what? That's why I don't want to. Even though the Gemara is talking about food stores, groceries.
Right.
I don't want to specifically say that that's pshat, because I think it's not. I think it's because it's all about the honor of Shabbos. Since it's the honor of Shabbos, anything ancillary to the honor of Shabbos. I'll give you an example. The flower stores were open because you had to bring flowers to your wife for Shabbos.
Well,
okay, there you go. In fact,
you mean?
Well, Daddy, not so pushing, because in those days,
Rabbi, you taught him well. You taught him well.
Actually, I don't do it that often. But the Gemara actually talks about hadassim for Shabbos, myrtles for Shabbos. There are Hasidim that Daf can do that, because the Gemara mentions for bringing hadassim that have a nice smell and are beautifully green into the house for Shabbos. I think it's brought down in the Sefton Shabbos, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong.
It's for the covered Shabbos.
The covered Shabbos. You can walk in. Right. So
I probably would say that the stores that have food would open their doors. The other ones, the other type, if you needed something, you would knock on the door and get it
You know,
they wouldn't actually open it.
right. In other words, they might have put a sign, we are open, but not
Yeah.
keep the door open.
Like,
Right.
like we did during COVID.
Yeah.
I was
Except,
exactly.
except for stores like Target that also had clothing, etc., were able to open up.
Right.
Very
They-
good. And you know, Danny, that's the
What?
pharmacies. During COVID, the pharmacies were open. The
They were open.
groceries were open. Yeah. So that's very good. I was thinking that too. How funny that this Gemara sounds very similar to what happened in COVID. Yeah. So let's
Actually,
go.
if you want to know,
Yeah.
if COVID had taken place in the time of Chazal of the Gemara, they would have called the fast days, just like like they did.
Actually, Daddy, this actually just to surprise everybody. The Gemara in Masechtas Baba Kama, the sixth parak Hakainis,
Yeah.
Daf Samech Amid Beis 60 side 2 Amid
Right.
Beis, right on top. Dever Bo Le'ir.
Right.
A plague comes into the city. And you know what a plague is? If 3 people die in the
Right.
city on the same day,
You have
it's
to
a
call
plague.
they blow
You know what?
shofar and everything.
No.
What?
The Gemara brings 3 different psukim. And the Gemara says, why 3 psukim? The first pasuk is, go into your house and shut the door.
Right.
The second pasuk is, what happens if you don't like to be alone and you want to go out in the street and hang with your friends? No, stay in your house. The third one is, you think you want to go to shul and daven? No, stay in your house. Rava says the Gemara that Rava used to seal his windows during a plague because it says the Malach HaMoves comes through the windows. So the Marsha brings down that if you can get out of town and get to Florida, away from New York and the coronavirus, that's what you should do. But if you cannot, he says, Pasach Ragloi, pick up your feet, go into your house, and don't go out into the street. The actual halacha was, and everybody learned it, and everybody learned it theoretically, but when it became mamoshistic, nobody paid attention. In fact, it's a straight out Gemara. Go look, Samach Hamid Beis on top.
Yeah, I know that Gemara.
And look at the Marsha. Go look at the words of the Marsha. Go into your house and don't come out. That's what the Marsha.
Chazal knew about such a thing.
Oh, and Chazal was a lot tougher than we were.
Right.
A lot tougher than we were. Okay. Anyways, I know, and people were shocked when I brought this to their attention. Anyways, says the Gemara, Avru elu v'loy nanu. If you do the 7 fasts and you're not answered, the rain does not come. Chas v'sholem. B'mante b'masa b'matan. One should increase their commercial business, u'bibinyan u'menitiya, and building and in planting trees. Tana, we learned bibinyan with regarding construction. Bibinyan shel simcha. We're talking about construction of a joyous nature. Nitiya, planting. We're talking about a nitiya shel simcha, planting of a joyous nature. But ordinary building and ordinary planting is allowed to continue. In other words, we don't want you to grind the economy to a halt. That does not help anyone. It's stupid. Now, 14b3, I make that point again right here during this part of Corona. 14b3, what is a binyan of simcha? That somebody who builds a wedding chamber for his son. Ezu Nitiya Shel Simcha. What is a planting of joy? Zer Hanoite Avarikoni Shel Malachim. One who plants a tree of the kings. This was that when the king was inaugurated or he had a son or something happened, it was a great honor to plant a tree in honor of the king or his son. I want to make a point that Jerry Abramson very nicely, when my mother passed away, Allah Shalom, believe it or not, in about less than 20 days, I stopped saying Kaddish already for my mother. We're only a month and a half away from her first yard site. Jerry went ahead and did something beautiful, and he planted a tree in Eretz Yisrael in the memory of my mother.
I know, and I think thank him again.
And it's this Gemara right here, because in doing that, you have no idea, Jerry, what kind of nechama you gave my father and myself. Its
Right.
mamish was, in the words of this Gemara, Hanoite avaranki shel malachim. It was a planting of a tree of, in this case, a tree of a queen. And it gave us great joy and great consolation. You should know that. And you were Mekayim a Gemara. Goes to show. So thank you, Jerry. And sorry I just embarrassed you, but there you go.
Thank you too. Again.
There you go. Ubeshela shalom. And one should not greet. One should not engage in greeting one another. Okay? Tanu Rabbanan. Chaverim. That means, Chaverim means, in this case, Torah scholars, very, very distinguished people. Ain shalom shalom b'neihem. They should be strict with this rule. Do not greet. Don't say shalom aleichem aleichem shalom. However, if the common people greet the Talmidei Chacham and they say hello, machzir lehem, you absolutely have to respond to them. But how? B'safar rabo b'choyved rosh, in low tones, in a solemn manner. In other words, you have to give them the understanding. You have to answer them back. That's the proper behavior. But in this way, you will teach them that something's going on and how you have to behave during a time when there's no rain. Okay? Veheim misatfim b'yoshim ka'avelim u'menudin. And the Talmidei Chachamim wrapped themselves like mourners and like exhumated people. The word wrapped is because of the halacha of the tsaras of the lepers. The halacha is that a leper has to wrap himself all the way to his eyes and to his mouth. Okay? That's unfortunate but that was what lepers had to do. B'vnei Adam hanezufim lamokim, they had to dress this way because as people who are being chastised by the Holy One, by the Omnipresent in the word of the Art Scroll, Ad shirachmeinu aleim in Hashemayim, until Rachmanis, mercy is shown to them from heaven and rain comes. Amar Rabbi Elazar, says Rabbi Elazar, Ein Adam choshuv rishoy lipol al panav. A prominent person cannot prostrate himself, cannot fall to the ground, crying out in public while playing for the welfare of the community. Even though he wants to be, he wants to be answered, so he's going that way. Why? Elohim came because what happens if he's not answered? What happens? Then he becomes too ridiculed. More than that, it erodes the idea of emunas chachamim, trust in our sages. I'm going to come back to this Gemara in a second. Elohim Kain Nena Ki Yeshua ben Nun, unless he's recognized that he's answered like Yeshua ben Nun. Shenema vayomer Hashem el Yeshua. Hashem told Yeshua, "Kumla, get up, stop laying on the ground prostrated." Why is it that you still prostrate yourself? Okay? Now, I just want to take 1 second to talk about this Gemara. In this Gemara is the great danger of some. I don't want to disparage all Kabbalists, but this is a dangerous thing when they tell you do this, that, and the other, and this is going to be healed, or this is going to happen. No human being has the right to say, you do this and this is going to happen.
No, of
It
course,
doesn't.
nobody can, nobody.
And when they do that, and if it doesn't happen, what happens? It
You lose
erodes.
faith.
You can say you can do it or do it, and then basically see what happens. That
Right.
an analogy. The Rebbe used to do this. The people used to
Right.
say, Rebbe, for the last 10 years we've been trying to have a baby. However, nothing happened. He says, do me a favor, change the mikveh. Okay, that's it. Not change the mikveh. That the result will happen. Change the mikveh.
Right. You never said, and this will happen.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
You never said those words. Correct.
Right.
Right.
Change
And that is
change
right.
the people, places, and things, and
the Rebbeinu Shalom will do his thing.
correct.
Right. But it's not human beings. So I just want to tell over two great stories. One is with the Sfas Emes, one of the early Gerer Rebbes. An old woman came in exactly like Jerry said. She needed kids, whatever it is, and she said, "Rebbe, you daven because Hashem always listens to you." And the Sfas Emes said, "I refuse to daven." For an hour she beseeched him. Finally, she said, "Forget you. I'll daven to Hashem because He always answers me." Right? And he said, "Now I will daven." That's the way to go. But the other story is more our time. There was once the Stipler, that would be Rav Chaim Kanievsky's father, right? The great Stipler was known somehow that miracles happened with him. Anyways, one time it came out that that a miracle happened with the Stipler. So Rav Shach, the Rosh Yeshiva of Panovich, called up the Stipler and said, "What's this? I'm hearing you did miracles. We don't do miracles. What is this? We're a bunch of Litvaks. We don't do this stuff." So the Stipler said, "This is what happened. I was sitting there and people were passing by and I was doing the Bracha V'Atzlacha. Bracha V'Atzlacha. Okay, then I needed to finish. I needed to go back to learn. But one guy refused to leave. And he said, Bracha V'Atzlacha is not good enough. Blessings and success is not good enough. I want to hear that it's gonna happen." So finally the Stipler said, "I needed to go back to learn. So I said, Amir Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will answer your tefillahs and it'll all be good." And the guy left and he was all happy. And then the Stipler said, "What did the Stipler said? What in the world did I just say?" The Stipler said, "What in the world did I just say? Who am I to say that it's Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to do? What am I going to do?" So he told Rav Shach, "I went to the shelf and I took out a Tehillim and I said a few kapitlach of Tehillim. I said a few chapters of Tehillim. That's what happened." So the Rav Shach said, "Oh, you pulled out a Tehillim? You davened? That's not a miracle. You pulled out a Tehillim, you davened, and I said that's in your tefillahs. That's not called a miracle. That's called davening." So that's this Gemara, and it's very important. And what Jerry said is absolutely correct. The great Lubavitcher Rebbe Zeichat Tzadik L'Bracha, what he called, never said this will happen. What he said was, do this, change something, do, and let's see what happens. That's all. V'Omer Rabbi Elazar, says Rabbi Elazar, Ein Adam Choshuv Rishoy Lachkor Sak. A prominent person is not allowed to wrap himself in sackcloth. Elim Kain Neneki or Yehoram ben Achav. Only if he's answered like the king Yehoram ben Achav. Shenemar, and I'm going to give cases like this. Yehoram actually was a Rasha, an evil king. Nonetheless, a woman came to him in a time of famine and told him, at great Taanis with her neighbor, that her neighbor had not sheared the meat of her son that she had cooked that afternoon. She was supposed to shear the meat of her son with her because yesterday she cooked up her son and shared the meat of her son with the neighbor. Yehoyam the Russia heard this, and he was so appalled by this that he wrapped himself in sackcloth and he fell to the floor and davened to the Rebbeinu Shlomo. And at that moment, he was such a tzaddik. He felt the pain of his people so terribly that they should fall to the point that they were cooking up their sons and they were taking it for granted that he was answered. Yes, Daddy.
I fault him terribly. If he was the king, he should have known about the matzav of his people. He was it's exactly what you see today with the government. They have everything themselves. He lived in his own beautiful castle and he had food and everything. And he didn't know anything about the plight of his people. You understand?
It was Maria Antoinette. Let them eat bread. Or,
you don't even have to say that. It's like those guys in the government. They tell you you gotta take an electric car. You can't drive a thing, but they go with their own fancy limousine.
Daddy, I have to say, this past week, somebody said it's okay, it's all right that the food is so expensive. You don't have to buy so much. You don't have to use so much. Or to spend the money. I mean, the way it came out is literally like Maria Antoinette. Exactly. Right. But the difference here is that at that moment in time,
if they don't have bread, let them eat cake.
Cake. At that moment in time, it grabbed him, and for a moment in time, he was a true leader of Klal Yisrael, and he dived into Hashem and he was answering. The pasuk says like this: Shenema, Vayikish Shmaya Melech is Divrei Aisha. When the king heard the woman's words, her taina, her complaint that her friend was not sharing her son's meat with her, like she shared her son's meat with the neighbor. Vayikoras begodav, and he ripped his clothes while he was passing on the wall. Vayaram, and the people saw B'inei asak al basari, and there was sackcloth on his flesh, and he was answered. Not everybody can rip their clothes. Not anybody can simply fall on the floor and prostrate themselves to be answered. Moshe and Aaron were answered by prostrating themselves on the floor. Yeshua and Caleb were answered only through ripping their clothes. Moshe and Aaron ben Nefila v'ksiv vayipo Moshe v'Aaron al pneihem, and Moshe and Aaron fell on their faces, prostrated themselves in prayer. Yeshua v'Kaleb b'kriya, by ripping the ksiv, v'Yeshua ben Nun v'Kaleb ben Yefua karu b'kdeihem, they rent their clothes. This is by the story of the Meraglim, the spies. So pray to Gemara, Maskeplo Rab Zera v'Yitevi Rab Shmuel ben Nachmani. Rab Zera and other people say Rab Shmuel ben Nachmani had challenged this. I would have said, like Rabbi Eliezer said, that Yeshua enhanced this prayer only by ripping his clothes. Yeshua and Yeshua, which is right next to Moshe and Aaron bowing down, prostrating themselves in tefillah. 14b4. Ovid, it means that Yeshua did both. Besides rendering his garments, he also prostrated himself on the floor like Moshe and Aaron did. Aaron and Moshe did not have to rip their clothes. When amidst Hashem, Mashiach will come. And what he called, and will come to greet Eretz Yisrael, with great Klal Yisrael at the time of the redemption. May it come speedily in our days. Not everybody can do that standing. And not everybody will greet them while bowing. prostrated.
It's talking about the nations of the world.
The nations of the world. Malachim v'kima, kings will greet Klal Yisrael while standing. V'starim v'shtachavos, and nobles will greet them while prostrated. Malachim v'kima, kings will greet them while standing. Diksiv, Koyamar Hashem, so says Hashem, Goyel Yisrael Kedushosai, the Redeemer of Israel and His Holy One. And now we're on Tes Vav Amud Aleph. Shabbos is Daf 15a1. Livzais Nefesh L'Sayib Goy LeEbed Moishim Malachim Yiru B'Kamu. They will come, to the degraded soul, to the abhorred of nations, to those ruled by servants. In other words, they're talking about us, Klal Yisrael. Kings shall witness and stand. Kings will witness our redemption and stand. V'sarim mishtachvis, and nobles will prostrate. Ksiv sarim v'yishtachavu. Nobles, and they will prostrate themselves. Maskib lo Rav Zera v'yitev Rav Shmuel Nachmani. On this came Rav Zera and other sages Rav Shmuel Nachmani to challenge this. Iav ksiv v'sarim yishtachavu k'di amrit. I would have said that the nobles will prostrate themselves, not stand. Nobles and prostrate themselves. That they're going to do both. The nobles are both going to stand and prostrate themselves. Not everybody will merit the light in the next world. Not everybody will merit gladness. Tzadikim will merit the light. Shorim l'simcha, and the upright with gladness. Okay, so Rashi says that the upright transcend the level of the righteousness, and their reward is greater.
It's a higher madrega.
Right, but the Rashbam argues, and the Rashbam says just the opposite. That the upright of heart is not as high as the righteous. Either way, Diksib, light is sown for the righteous, Yisharim simcha, and for the upright will come gladness. Diksib, Yishrei leiv simcha, and for the upright heart, gladness. The bottom line here is first of all, what does it mean, the next world? Whether it means after after 120 years, or does it mean when the time of Mashiach and Chiyas HaMesim? That's a machlokes Rishonim. That's an argument of the Rishonim. Number two, we all, after 2,000 years of Askaponim, who continue to struggle to try to serve the Rebbeinu Shalom, do what's right and good in his lives, right? Who get up here in the morning and try to learn his Torah and be part of the conversation, to place ourselves in the conversation of Torah that began so long ago and is so relevant to this very day. Will be Zoicha to both, to the Oira and to the Simcha. We should return to you, Me'emesai. We should turn to you, Me'emesai. We should turn to you, Me'emesai. We should turn to you, Me'emesai.